My name is Alicia, and today I am with an organization that have been fighting human trafficking for over 14 years. It is really amazing to sit down here with you guys, and would you like to introduce yourselves?
Thank you. So I'm Amy Harris, I'm the Fundraising and Relationship Officer at Hope for Justice.
And I'm Adam Hewitt, I'm the Head of Digital and Communications at Hope for Justice.
And I'm Rachel Hartley, I'm the team lead at Slave Free Alliance, which is the social enterprise owned by Hope for Justice.
So Adam, could you tell us a bit more about the work that you do here at Hope for Justice?
Yeah, so Hope for Justice is an international organisation. We work in 10 countries to help the victims and survivors of human trafficking and modern slavery. And some people do find it hard to believe that people in our world today are still bought and sold and traded on. People think it's a relic of the past, but it's not. It happens today. Criminals who are profiting from the misery of other human beings. And one of the saddest things for me is the fact that almost all of us are contributing in some way, whether we know it or not, through things like the food we buy, the clothes we buy, things like cosmetics as well. The fact is that there are people living in modern slavery and forced labour in the supply chains of really big companies, really well-known companies as well. The International Labour Organization estimates that more than 16.3 million people are caught in these conditions, and that's what Hope for Justice fights against. People living and working in these brutal conditions.
It's absolutely horrifying to hear. How would you say that people are profiting from it, and also how does someone end up in modern day slavery?
Modern day slavery is all about human traffickers exploiting some kind of vulnerability. That's at the core of it, exploiting a vulnerability for greed and profit. They will manipulate kind of desperate or unsure people. They'll establish a bond of trust somehow through false promises of accommodation or food or transport or just getting out of some desperate circumstance the person finds themselves in. But then gradually that will become a form of control through manipulation, psychological or financial, and sometimes that is then coupled even with threats and violence as well. We do see, sadly, threats to family as well, kind of back home, just to keep people in line, keep people feeling like they have to work in these conditions. And it's important to know that people rarely self-identify as a victim of human trafficking or modern slavery. They'll often need the help of a charity like ours to really understand what's happening to them and just kind of how bad it is, and that there is help available.
So where do you start? What does Hope for Justice do to kind of help the situation and change it?
Yeah, so I mean, it looks different in the different countries where Hope for Justice works, which is across 5 different continents and many different kind of cultures and
sort of tailored
laws.
To the needs, yeah.
It is, yeah, exactly. So for us, it starts with preventing exploitation, and that can mean a lot of different things. It can mean helping families and communities economically to avoid things like family breakdown, which is a really major risk factor for children being trafficked and exploited in particular. It can mean training and awareness, so people can spot the signs of modern slavery, human trafficking in their own communities, know what to do, who to report it to. And in some cases it can even mean intervening before the worst happens. There are times where we've had reports, before somebody has said yes to that offer that was too good to be true, we've managed to get in and help them before that. And then linked to all this prevention is our other strains of work around rescue, directly helping victims. Restoration, so that's aftercare, trauma-informed, safe shelter, and helping people grow into new opportunities and freedom. And then reforming society, because that's ultimately how we'll stop modern slavery. It's not about individuals, it's about societies, it's about governments and business and what we all do together and not tolerating this crime anymore. So it does, ultimately our work comes back to people. That's the really important thing. It's people's own circumstances, and most of our work day to day is helping people out of these circumstances.
Yeah, and what kind of dangerous circumstances do you find people in? What kind of situations?
Some of it is really horrifying. We help children and adults, but some of the cases with children are, particularly heartbreaking. We've helped children as young as 4 or 5 years old who are living alone on the streets and then being targeted by traffickers for profit. They'll force them into sexual exploitation, they'll force them into dangerous work in factories or mines, and it's really brutal what happens. Sometimes whole families are targeted and kept there for generations through what's called debt bondage. Fortunately, we run these lighthouse centres, as we call them, which are safe shelters where children who come out of these circumstances can get good food, trauma-informed care and counselling, kind of good opportunities and education for the future, and just somewhere where they can be cared for and have a normal childhood, and get to be a child enjoying playtime with other children. Because no child should ever experience these things. It's really horrifying.
It's horrendous.
Yeah, you're so right, Adam, as well. And you mentioned earlier about the clothes that we buy and the food that we eat, and the supply chains that sit behind these products are so complex, they're so vast, and they rely on the labour of millions of people globally. And unfortunately, these supply chains are rife with exploitation, labour exploitation, possibly with child labour, the risk of modern slavery. And for businesses, some of them are unknowingly complicit in this. They're not doing enough to be aware of these risks and to understand them, to find them. But unfortunately, we do have the businesses that are knowingly complicit. They're turning a bit of a blind eye to some of these practices because ultimately they profit off that. Adam talked about, how traffickers profit. Fortunately, businesses can play a similar role. And they do make a profit off this exploitation. That's important for us to realise as well. And particularly when it comes to the clothing industry, we have to think about the sheer quantities that are being produced and some of the prices that are being charged to consumers, and that can't happen without the risk of exploitation.
It's so true. What about these companies, these brands and these businesses? What is being done to hold them to account?
It's a really good question, and thankfully there's a positive side to it as well. There are some businesses who are taking the right steps to address these risks. They're trying really hard, they're leaning into it, they're trying to understand really how this works in their supply chain, and they recognise that this can't be fixed overnight as well. And Hope for Justice, they saw this opportunity as well and the gap here to really help those businesses, and that's why they started Slave Free Alliance. So though Hope for Justice has been around over 14 years doing their great work, Slave Free Alliance is 4 years old, and for those 4 years we've been partnering with businesses to help them understand those risks, to help them address those risks and build their resilience to the infiltration of traffickers as well. But the truth is, we can never guarantee a slave-free supply chain. It's really unobtainable, unfortunately. This issue is always changing, it's evolving, the practices develop, and businesses need to continually respond and understand that risk is always present in some form or another. So that's where SFA comes in. We act as an extension of their business and help them understand these sorts of risks and address them.
And has it been difficult getting these brands on board, all these fashion brands and houses? Because it actually sounds like a really useful tool for any business to have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not without its difficulties, definitely. I've worked in the fashion industry for over 6 years and seen a lot of different approaches, different methods, attempts at different things, and some have got it right and some haven't. It has been difficult because I think businesses sometimes see this as exposing potentially their weaknesses or exposing them to public scrutiny, when they really need to see it as an empowering agenda, that they're leaning in, looking at these risks, how people might be harmed in their operations and their supply chain, and doing something about it. It's a good agenda to be a part of. Now, the fashion industry has had great progress. It's probably further ahead than most other industries, but we've still got big problems. So there's still a lot for us to do. But the fashion industry, it responds to its consumers. The consumers control the narrative a lot of the time, and they flex with them. So our buying power as consumers, we all have it here as well, is really important, and we can channel that in the right way, and we can hold those brands to account on this agenda as well, and where we choose to spend our money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I haven't bought any newly produced clothes for 2.5 years.
Amazing.
So I am all on board with you guys. And, when I started just buying vintage and secondhand, it was as a startup purely for the environment. And it wasn't until afterwards when I sort of started reading up about it more, when I realized exactly what you're talking about as well, that the workers in a lot of these fast fashion brands are working under horrible circumstances, and I don't see myself starting to buy newly produced very soon. But I think it's for everyone, just as you mentioned as well, that reading up on the companies that you decide to purchase fashion from, just look into what they stand for is an amazing start.
Yeah, and you've got it spot on. You know, we can all do our little bit with choosing where we spend our money, and as consumers, we need to hold those brands accountable.
Yeah.
So when we're buying,
it's time.
It really is time, and we can ask the questions, you know, do you know where your factories are around the world? Do you know who's making your clothes? These are people. I think some of these industries get so dehumanized because we just see products. But these are made by people with their hands, and that's really important to remember as well. And with the business, you know, do they have a corporate responsibility agenda where they're looking at their impact on people and the planet? Do they put things on their website? But beyond that, are they not just talking the talk, but is there action behind it as well? Is there substance to what they're saying, and what can they show for it is really important. There's also some really good brand ranking platforms in the fashion industry as well. So two of my favourites are the Fashion Transparency Index and an app called Good On You. And they can help guide you as a consumer as to where you should put your money as well, and shop with brands who are standing for a more ethical agenda.
There are ways to educate yourself, basically. Yeah.
We've just got to take that little bit of time to do it, really, is all we need. But like you said, Alicia, you know, there is so much good quality clothing already there. Good quality clothing lasts a very, very long time. It's not designed to be disposable. And we don't have to keep buying new, you know, shopping secondhand, renting, which is a growing industry as well, and also upcycling what you have are really good ways to avoid, you know, getting into the cycle of newness as well.
Exactly, guys. We don't need to fall into the trap of buying brand new stuff constantly that we probably will only wear a few times before throwing it out. And it's so important to know that whether we can make a difference in supporting victims, you don't have to be the owner of a multi-billion industry, a fashion house, to change lives. You can just do something with what's in your hands. Just doing your little bit makes such big difference. And one of my favorite sayings, no one can do everything, but everyone can do something.
Absolutely, and you're so right with that as well. And I think one of the things that I'm particularly proud of amongst our organisation is the work that we're doing with businesses to address the risk of exploitation of refugees that they have at the moment with Ukrainian refugees. And this risk is in their EU supply chains, also in their Central Asia supply chain. So at SFA, we're working really hard with our partners to get them to understand that, you know, refugees have got a very fragile status. You know, they struggle to get visas, work permits, bank accounts, you know, some of the standard things you need to get a safe job. And we really want our businesses to support safe employment, look at that risk of child labour, look at that risk of exploitation of adults as well. But it's a really complex situation, so we need businesses involved. They have to have a seat at the table. They've got to be aware of this. They hold a lot of power in that space as well, and it's such an important agenda. But at the same time, we've got the amazing work that Hope for Justice are doing directly with refugees that are fleeing Ukraine.
Yeah, and thankfully we're not the only anti-trafficking organisation that are actually doing something about the conflict in Ukraine at the moment. I think the response that we've taken as a sector has been fantastic. It's been so collaborative, and at the moment at Hope for Justice alone, we're working with multiple anti-trafficking organisations, including the British Red Cross, to actually make materials about...
That's amazing.
It really is, because these materials are raising awareness about what modern slavery is and what the signs of modern slavery are, which means that when we're getting them to the borders where they're most needed and making them where they're accessible, it's allowing those fleeing the conflict to look out for what the signs are. And that's really vital, because it means that with that knowledge, they're less likely to be manipulated by traffickers. And the response that our team has taken in the UK, so our programmes team have been absolutely incredible. A lot of them are actually volunteering their time with Homes for Ukraine, and they're going to be carrying out home visits for the houses that are going to be hosting those fleeing the conflict in the Ukraine as well. And I hope you don't mind me saying, but I've actually heard that you have taken in some people from Ukraine.
We do. We did. My family did back in Sweden. I think for us it was an obvious choice to be able to do the little we can. It was actually my brother who worked with this family in Ukraine for years ago, so we've known them for a few years. So we help them to get, if they could get across the border, we help them with the flights and everything to get safely to Sweden. And that feels amazing, because I couldn't think of a better purpose for the family farm to be used for, you know?
And that really is amazing, because it goes back to what you were saying before, in that not everyone can take massive actions, but everyone can just play their part.
Just something, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And in your case, you were able to do that, and that's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And we know that neighbouring countries really are doing all that they can to provide safety and housing to those who are fleeing the conflict in the Ukraine. And that's absolutely fantastic. But take, for example, initiatives like Homes for Ukraine. That's been fast-tracked, and what that means is that a lot of the safeguarding checks that usually would have been done with an initiative like that haven't been done this time. So, for example, those with criminal convictions are able to host individuals in their houses, but minimal safety checks are being done on that. And when we consider the fact that the majority of those fleeing the conflict are women and children, it really does raise a lot of concerns for us. And that's why we're working really, really hard at Hope for Justice to make sure that we're mitigating those risks as much as we can.
Well, you are doing an absolutely amazing job. And thank you so much for sitting down with me today and teaching me about all of these things, and teaching everyone out there that's watching. Thank you, everyone that's watching. And think about everything that we've discussed. Think about where you put your money. Think about what you're buying and what kind of businesses you are actually supporting out there. And if you want to find out more, like how to spot the signs of modern day slavery, please visit the website to find out more at Hope for Justice. And thank you.